Hello friends, today we are talking about the Fujifilm XH2S and we're going to be diving into all things settings, how I've set up this camera, the custom dials, all the custom buttons, to just show you guys how I really made this camera work for me, and in hopes that it would encourage you if you are, still trying to figure out how to set up your Fujifilm XH2S. And the great thing about this is this also is going to apply to other Fujifilm cameras. So if you own the XH2, the XT5, the XT4, the XT3, the XT30, a lot of these settings I have stuck with throughout being with Fuji, and so I would hope that you would also be able to pull something from this video, even if you're not on the XH2S, but you are using Fujifilm cameras for video. I did want to preface this video and say that these are the settings that have worked for me. You might have different use cases and be shooting different projects. Please take all this with a grain of salt, that this has been the settings so far that have worked well for me, but I am always changing. I'm always tweaking things to make using this camera that much easier. At the very end of this video, I am going to kind of peacefully just walk through every single menu. And so if you guys are interested in that, seeing every single setting that I am using, I am going to show you guys that. So feel free to watch that at the end if that would be helpful. Okay, so to start, we are going to dive into codecs and recording settings. And so at the time of making this video, I most commonly am shooting in 4K, 16:9, 23.98 frames per second. That's in the 422 H.265 10-bit profile, and I'm shooting at 200 megabits per second. That is pretty much personal or client work. I found 200 megabits per second is the sweet spot for me. ProRes just eats up too much card space right now, and I have no projects where ProRes is a requirement. Although it would maybe speed up editing and exports, my computer has had no issues with the H.265. And so yeah, that's been saving me lots of space while still giving me great quality. Compression wise, I have the camera set to long GOP, and I'm primarily shooting in either classic chrome or f-log2. Those profiles have kind of been the sweet spot for me of maximizing both usability and dynamic range. I have my data levels set to full range. If you were shooting ProRes, you would want to switch that to video range, but because I'm not shooting a lot of ProRes, I have the camera set to full range. And when it comes to the recording options, I am dual recording, so I'm recording both to the CF Express Type B card as well as an SD card. And for the CF Express Type B card, I'm using the Angelbird Express 512 gigabyte card. I've tested all of the different codecs on this camera, even up to the max bitrate with ProRes HQ, shooting in 6K, and this camera has handled everything with no issues. And then for the SD card slot, I'm actually still using a SanDisk Extreme Pro V30 card. It's also a 512 gigabyte card, so I have the same amount of space on both. But I've found when I'm shooting at 200 megabytes per second, I don't need the V90 version of this card, which is much more expensive. So if you guys are like me and are looking to save money and save a little bit of space, the V30 card is going to be great. Even if you're shooting 6K at 200 megabytes per second, it's handled all of that completely fine for me. Next up, we are diving into the custom dials. And so this is new with the XH2 and the XH2S, and I wanted to walk you guys through how I have set these up, primarily for video use. All of these are set to video mode. You can toggle between photo or video mode, but I have all of my presets set to video, and I do have the auto update custom settings turned on. Basically what that means is when you change a setting on one of these custom dials, it'll remain updated without you having to save it each time. If you do have the setting turned off, every time you turn off the camera, it's basically going to default to the settings that you set on that custom mode. And so I found this annoying when I am, shooting and I've already set my shutter speed for outdoor conditions or set my aperture appropriately. I don't really want that to change if I have to turn my camera off for a second to save battery life. So I have kept the auto update enabled. C1 I have set to 4K, 24 frames per second in classic chrome. C2 I have the exact same settings, but it's set to 60 frames if I want to shoot slow motion. C3, I have 4K, 24 frames per second in f-log2. C4, I have 4K, 60 frames per second in f-log2. C5 is 6.2K classic chrome. C6 is 6.2K f-log2. And C7 is 4K 120 in classic chrome. You might be wondering why I have none of these set to a photo mode. That is because I don't do a lot of photos, but when I do, I just keep my M mode set up for stills. And so that's kind of been a fun thing that I have found, that I don't have to take up one of the custom slots for photo. I can simply just switch the camera to M if I am wanting to shoot stills. Okay, so now we are going to dive into film simulations and everything that I do to customize the look that I'm getting out of this camera. And so when I'm not shooting f-log2, my go-to picture profile is classic chrome. I have my dynamic range just set to 100. I think that's the default. And I do adjust the settings from here. And so on my tone curve, I have the highlights set to -2, the shadows set to -2, and the color also set to -2. This basically helps the image be a little bit flatter coming out of the camera, giving a little bit more latitude in post for color grading. Sharpness I have set to -4. I'm primarily shooting on Sigma art lenses, which are very sharp, and I don't really need any of the digital sharpening coming from the camera, and so I do have that set as low as possible. High ISO noise reduction in classic chrome is set to 0. Some people have suggested going to -4 to maximize dynamic range, but I don't love to do noise reduction in post. So for now, I am keeping that just set at 0. And inner frame noise reduction is set to off. When I am shooting in classic chrome, I do have my zebras turned on and they are set to 100%. This basically really easily shows me if any of my highlights are being clipped. Moving on to f-log2, the primary things that I'm thinking about when I'm shooting f-log2 is I do bump up my high ISO noise reduction to +2. The base ISO is set at 1250 and you can't go below that, unfortunately. And so I've found that +2 gives me the best image coming out of the camera, that I don't have to do very much noise reduction in post, if ever. I've tried shooting a -4 like people have suggested to maximize dynamic range, but the image just ends up looking a little too grainy for my taste. I would always love to add grain later on if I want it, but I love having my image looking clean right out the camera. So I do have this set to +2, and then I do have the f-log view assist always set to on. And so basically what this does, it just allows you to preview a Rec 709 version of your image on your LCD screen, just so you can kind of expose like you would classic chrome or another profile where you can tell a little bit more easily how the image is looking. Moving on to exposure tools, I'm using 3 things to help me expose my image using the LCD screen. The first one is the histogram. I do have this set to on, as well as the meter that comes up on the side of the camera. I think there is one that you could set to the bottom, but I prefer to have the meter on the side that shows you generally where your image is sitting. And I do have that set to center weighted, so it's kind of taking the whole image into account, but primarily focusing on what you have framed in the center of your camera. I found that really helpful. If you do have the sky in your shot, it's not going to be taking a reading from just the sky alone. It's going to be balancing it out. The final exposure tool that I'm using that I already touched on is zebras. In classic chrome, like I said, I just have these set to 100%, but in f-log2, I do have them set to 85%. And so because f-log2 is a much flatter image, 85% is going to show you where your highlights start clipping. And this has been super great for making sure that I'm not blowing out the sky when filming indoors or outdoors. When it comes to autofocus, there's just a few things that I'm going to touch on. I am always shooting in the area mode, never the multi mode. I think multi might be more geared towards photo, but I've never found it to produce good results in video. I love being able to set my focus box where I want the camera to be looking to pull autofocus from, and that has given me great results. I feel like the only tweak that I have made is making the focus box a little bit smaller than default. I think this has just been helpful when I'm trying to pinpoint a subject that I want to keep in focus. It's not pulling from a large area. When it comes to the custom autofocus settings, I do have them set to +2 tracking sensitivity and -5 autofocus speed. However, I found shooting on Sigma art lenses that those settings don't do anything. So if you change them and you change it to +5, there's no difference. I believe those are really only for native Fuji lenses or other third-party lenses that are working in that way. And so yeah, would encourage you to try out what you think would work well for you, but I would suggest starting with the +2 and -5 if you are using native Fuji lenses. When it comes to IBIS, I have really enjoyed the image stabilization on this camera. This is my first camera to have IBIS, and it's been an awesome upgrade from the X-T3 that didn't have it at all. And so I just use it in the default setting, the IBIS/OIS, and I keep the boost mode set to off. I haven't found really a scenario where I need the boost mode or the additional, I believe you can also digitally stabilize on top of the IBIS. I haven't really used that at all either. I'm pretty much usually just rocking the IBIS standard or turning it off if I want a little bit more of a handheld look. When it comes to audio, I've been loving the preamps in the XH2S, even plugging in boom mics directly for interviews. I've just kept the level set to auto, and I've had great experience with that. I do keep the limiter turned on and the wind filter and low cut turned off. I would rather do any EQ that I need in post and don't really need my microphone to be cutting those frequencies for me. I'm now going to quickly go through all of the custom buttons and how I have laid these out to really work with my needs. And so the first three are just the record button, the white balance button, and the ISO button. I have kept these untouched, just as is. I enjoy where they're at on the camera. And I did want to share one workaround for the ISO button is actually setting it to the D-pad. And so I'll show you guys this later on, but I do have my ISO mapped to the up and down arrows on the D-pad. People have complained that you can't set the ISO to a dial and that it's quite annoying to push the ISO button, then change your ISO. And I agree, it's been a little bit slow and I wish that Fujifilm would update that feature. But for now, I have found it quite quick to just get used to using the D-pad to bring my ISO up and down. I don't have to hit the button on top of the camera. I can simply just start pressing the D-pad and the ISO changes. Function button 1 that is located on top of the camera, I have set to face tracking on and off. Depending on what I'm shooting, I'm either using face tracking or not. A lot of the times at weddings, I am not using face tracking, but in scenarios where I'm shooting live music or an artist recording music, I found the face tracking to work exceptionally well. And so having it on top of the camera is just really quick to toggle on and off need be. Function button 2 is on the front of the camera near the hand grip, and I have this set to the IBIS mode. There has been a few times where I'm needing a handheld shot to look like a locked off tripod shot or turn off my IBIS completely. And so I found that that's a great spot to put this for me. It's really quick to change and I don't find myself accidentally pressing it. Function button 3, I also have just untouched. That's on the front of the camera. Similar to previous Fujifilm models, this controls the autofocus or manual focus. Since I'm used to the X-T3 and how they had a little switch, I've just kept this button as is. It's really helpful if you're wanting to switch to just manual focus real quick or switch back to autofocus. Function buttons 4 through 7 are the D-pad, and so yeah, up and down I have mapped to ISO to quickly change ISO without having to hit the button on top of the camera. I have the left D-pad set to the electronic level just to make sure my shots are actually being composed correctly, and I have the right D-pad set to the mic level adjustment, letting me change from auto to manual or to adjust those levels really quickly need be if I'm shooting interviews or needing to capture some ambient audio really quickly. I currently do not use any of the touch functions on the camera. I have these all turned off, and basically I just never want to accidentally tap the screen and for a setting to be changed on my camera. I haven't found a big use for those yet, so just have them set to off. One little button that I have really loved, if you guys don't know about it, is the back button. And actually, if you hold it down, it really quickly brings up the Bluetooth menu. And I found this really helpful when I'm trying to transfer some photos to my phone just wirelessly really quickly. It's really easy to just turn Bluetooth on, transfer those photos, and then turn it off without having to go through the menus or take up one of your other custom buttons for this function. I really enjoyed that Fujifilm has included that on this camera. There are 2 buttons on this camera near your thumb that I have found super helpful. The first one is the autofocus on button. I actually have this mapped to autofocus lock. And in addition, if you change the toggle mode to S, it allows you to use it as a switch on and off. If I'm ever shooting in autofocus and I don't want to, the camera to be hunting, I simply push this AF on button and the focus will just lock. And then anytime I want to resume, I can simply push that button and it'll begin hunting for focus again. The second button is the AEL button, and I actually have this set to auto white balance lock. And this is super helpful if you are shooting in different scenarios where, you might be outside shooting in daylight and then need to come inside and shoot under tungsten light at a wedding. You do need to go in and make sure and set the lock mode to S, just like the autofocus button, so that this is just a toggled switch, so you don't have to be holding it. I believe if you don't change the setting, you actually have to hold it down with your thumb the entire time you want the setting to be on. So get it set up as a switch, and really enjoy getting to switch between white balances and lock them off really easily. I'm going to do a quick run through of just a few random settings that I've found. If you're struggling with overheating, make sure to set your auto power off temp to high. I have shot with this camera in the hot summer outside here in Kansas City and in full sun and have not run into any issues yet of overheating. But if you are experiencing that, just make sure that setting is set to high. It'll allow your camera to get as hot as possible before it would shut off. The next setting that's super helpful is the tally lights. There are tally lights on the front and the back of the camera that basically just come on when you're recording. I found this super helpful, whether I'm shooting YouTube stuff, wedding stuff, just to have that physical indicator that my camera is indeed recording is so nice. I can't tell you how many times before I had this on, I would just come over to my camera and it accidentally turned off, or I thought it was on. And so I have both those just set to the solid LED, so it's not blinking, it's not distracting, but does show me when the camera's rolling. When it comes to shooting in 6K, there's really one setting that I am changing. And with my current monitor, it does not accept a 6K signal. And so to get the signal to be sent, I actually have to turn on the HDMI output info display. I usually don't like sending this, but for 6K I have to. And so if you guys are also running into that issue, just make sure you have that on, and that will push the quality of the current LCD screen, that resolution through to your monitor. Okay, so when it comes to the quick menu, I'm just gonna quickly go through this. You are not able to change this first one. This is the shooting mode. I just have it set to manual. You could set it to something else, but I shoot everything in manual, so M. This second slot I have to the internal mic level adjustment, in case that is easier to access it that way rather than the D-pad. I do have manual focus assist right here, so I don't shoot with manual focus a lot where I need focus peaking, but in the event that I do, I just really quickly come in here, usually set it to white high, and it's pretty quick. Right here is the face eye detection, if I want to toggle that on and off, as well as the IBIS mode, if I need it to boost or be turned off, can do it right here. This is the IS mode boost again. And then this is the fixed movie crop magnification. I don't use this a ton, but could be helpful for punching in when you need a little bit more reach. To be honest, I don't really use the quick menu at all, hence a lot of these being redundant and this one not even being used. So if you use the quick menu, let me know down below how you utilize it and how it might benefit my setup. Moving along to the My menu, I just wanted to show you guys this. I just have a one-page list of a few things. And so right here, I just have my movie settings, can really quickly access, any of this if I need to change it on the fly. I don't touch it a lot, but it is there. I do have my data levels right here in case I would need to switch to ProRes. This just helps me remember that I need to either be, in video range or full range. F-Log, HLG, mainly I'm just switching to F-Log 2 if I need it. Flickerless shutter speed, I haven't found a use case for this yet, but I did think it was a cool setting. If you have it on, you basically can more fine tune your shutter speed by 0.2 increments, which is cool. Go ahead and set that back to off. I do have my zebras right here, just so I can quickly see that they're on and the percentage that they're set to. If I'm in F-Log 2, I'm going 85 and 100 if classic chrome. Again, just my mic level adjustment, just so I can visually see it. I love being able to access things through multiple different ways. And finally, HDMI output setting. If I did need to shoot in 6K, I'm turning that on. So hope that is helpful. But since they introduced the new custom dials, I haven't been doing too much with the My Menu or the Quick Menu. Before we wrap this video up, I am just going to slowly walk through the entire menu system and show you guys as many settings as possible, what I have set. And so yeah, if you're interested in that, stick around and we will slowly go through it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope that it was helpful to you if you are shooting on the XH2S or another Fujifilm camera and are still trying to figure out what settings and button layout works for you. Again, these are just my needs and how I've found this camera to work for me, but feel free to play around and customize anything that I said to work better for the types of projects you're shooting. Yeah, please let me know down below if you have any questions. I would love to answer them, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.